Aftermarket service organizations have a tremendous opportunity to increase customer satisfaction while garnering more recurring revenue from servicing ever more complex vehicles, machines, and more. Seizing that opportunity means implementing technology, including AI, that helps them capture and effectively utilize the data that is foundational to success. Hi everyone, I'm Paul Desmond, Content Strategist with CIO Marketing Services, and I'm glad you could join us today for this webinar where you'll hear from two experts from IDC and Synchron on how to best capitalize on the aftermarket opportunity. We'll hear from our speakers in just a second. But first, I want to let you know there's lots of resources and assets available about today's topic in the resources section of your player. So be sure to check those out and download at will. And I also want to send out a big thanks to our sponsor, Synchron, for making today's event possible. With that, let's meet our speakers. First up is Ali Pinder, who is Research Vice President of Aftermarket Services Strategies with IDC. Welcome, Ali.
Thank you.
Also with us, Sean O'Neill, Chief Product and Technology Officer with Synchron. Thanks for being here, Sean.
Glad to join us today, Paul.
All right, Ali, let's start with you. And I know you've done a lot of research on this topic, including the shift that's been happening in the market and the opportunity the aftermarket presents in terms of products and services. Could you sort of set the table for our discussion by describing the recent trends you've seen, and including what's driving the aftermarket opportunity and how you see technology helping companies take advantage of it?
Thanks, Paul. And this is a topic that I'm extremely passionate about, and I'd love to share many of the insights that we're finding here at IDC. Most of you who are joining today are within the technology organization, so CIOs, leaders of IT strategy, when you think about ways in which you're investing in the tools and capabilities to drive your businesses forward. When I think about the aftermarket, one of the key drivers that is really resonating with your peers on the service side of the business is the fact that we're continuing to see how AI is impacting the organization from an aftermarket perspective. There's not one conversation I get into that doesn't talk about AI, how that is driving organizations forward when you think about the insights that are driving at intelligent decisions being made across the business. We continue to see AI transforming not only the ability to automate processes, but also to change business models and business modes for organizations. We also see how it's impacting the workforce and changing the way in which service workers have the insights at their fingertips to make better decisions. We're also seeing within our research that organizations are beginning to recognize the need to think about how they future-proof their businesses, not just from an ES&G perspective, but also on the fact that competition is coming after organizations when you think about differentiation. And finally, we continue to see businesses really struggle with technical debt that's been invested in over decades of their businesses. Across the aftermarket, organizations are recognizing the fact that they need to rethink their legacy systems, their tools, and the capabilities that they have in place to modernize their businesses and their processes. As we continue to see customers and companies evolve their business to differentiate within the service world, they need the tools and technology to make those decisions faster and wow customers on each and every engagement. We also look at how organizations are thinking about their next 12 to 24 months when they think about priorities for their businesses. The manufacturing environment, the aftermarket, is very complex, where companies are dealing with dealers, they're dealing with partners, they're dealing with suppliers, they have a workforce that's distributed across the globe. When we think about how organizations are rethinking their aftermarket businesses, top of mind for these organizations is how they can leverage technology and tools to drive at new revenue opportunities for business. They no longer see the aftermarket as an afterthought, something that's only in place to cut down costs. They really recognize the opportunity that the aftermarket has to drive at new value positioning to customers. Not just to wow customers with great experiences, which is great, building loyal customers for life, but also rethinking how they can get a bigger share of wallet from these customers. And it comes from having the tools and technology to really support a new value proposition to those organizations. Now, we're at IDC, we're a data company, so we like to build up models and talk about trends in the market. And when we look at opportunities for businesses moving forward, historically, the service organization has been fairly siloed when you think about the applications that support their technology infrastructure. When we think about how businesses move from a siloed organization to more reactive, hopefully getting to a level of proactivity and predictive, they need the tools and technology to make that change. Now, as you see the data pop up on the slide, most of the organizations on the slide are no longer in that siloed environment. So you as a CIO, if your business is still fragmented, you have technology that's siloed in functions, then you're behind the curve. That doesn't mean you won't be able to get there, move to the right, but you need to reevaluate the way in which your technologies help seeding the organization from an aftermarket perspective to move to the right and become more predictive and more prescriptive. And how are you going to get there? One of the key opportunities we see within business is that the amount of data at the fingertips of your employees is only moving at an exponential rate. Historically today, only about half of equipment is connected. Where organizations want to be in the next 3 years is to have nearly 2/3 of assets, products, to be equipped and connected so that the data and insights can be leveraged at the point of service and need. I see this as an opportunity. As a CIO, it's important for you to understand the data's there. It's what you're able to enable and empower the frontline worker with to make insights out of that data that's at their fingertips. It's not just about capturing more data in silos that's fragmented. It's about seeding the frontline with the right tools to be able to make decisions. With that, I'll send it back to you, Paul.
Thank you, Ali. Well, there's a lot to digest there, but Sean, any top line thoughts on how Ali's findings kind of jibe with what you've been seeing in the market with customers?
Oh, absolutely. And very similar, as we're chatting with lots of our customers, we see lots of interest in aftermarket. It is highly profitable, but it's hard to win. And a lot of our customers have very fragmented business functions that end up having a disjointed customer experience at the end, and that affects that customer's performance, uptime, and how much they ultimately value these products. So when we're talking to our clients, you need a strategy to win loyalty, because when somebody asks about loyalty, they're really talking about market share, aftermarket share, and someone else is servicing those parts and labor. It's just not you. So this needs to be a steal share strategy for you, because you don't, not enough just to have the parts available or the technician available at the right price. You got to outperform your competition.
All right. And it sounds like, Ali, it's definitely going to take a lot of technology and data to make that happen. Could you sort of walk us through what you see as an ideal scenario for, say, an automaker sells an expensive car to a customer? What should happen in the years after that sale to maximize their aftermarket revenue?
Yeah, I really like what Sean noted around that outperformance piece, right? When I think about an auto manufacturer who's selling through a dealer network, we all have to take our vehicles in for service over a period of time, right? 10,000 miles or 10 years, right? So, I think there's an opportunity when you think about the brand and you think about the services associated with the brand. Oftentimes, the logo on your vehicle is not the person that's going to be servicing it when you get on site. You're going through a dealer who is a franchisee who is still helps that brand deliver value. And when I think about going into a service site to have my vehicle maintained and oil changed, I wish I could do it on my own. I can't. But the thing is, when I get on site for that 90-minute window that I'm going to be there, the service dealer should know who I am as a customer. They should know when I bought the vehicle. They should know how often I've had it serviced. They should know what parts they need when I bring the vehicle in. And all that should happen seamlessly without me even recognizing that all that's being orchestrated in the background, right? It's all about how data is being orchestrated across a business so that the customer doesn't see any effort. They're not part of everything that's happening across each of those silos of data. And when you go back to that superior experience that Sean talked about, I think there's really an opportunity for CIOs on this call to think about unraveling that data across the business so that the user, being the service worker, and the customer don't see any of the friction. They just have an outcome that's valuable that they're willing to pay for.
Yep.
And that really reinforces the best experiences. The user doesn't even know how much effort went into it because it just worked. And I do think when in an auto example, the warranty gives you an opportunity to win someone's loyalty, but the challenge is, can you actually keep it? And the answers may already be inside your data silos. So really even understanding not just how is your channel, your dealers doing overall, but there are best-in-class dealers that are really showing what's possible. How do you benchmark the rest of your channels and dealers against that so you figure out how much fair share are you leaving on the table?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the technology involved in making these scenarios a reality. I mean, starting with the fact that you got a number of players in the chain here, including dealers, distributors, suppliers, partners. third-party technicians and contractors, as you mentioned, Sean. What goes into forging connections among all these players and orchestrating the workflows such that you get the data you need when you need it? Sean, you want to enlighten us on that one?
Sure. It's a complicated space because over the last 20 years, we have lots of valuable applications or systems that have come to solve point solution problems. And they actually worked pretty well for a while until they don't. And now we have all this data trapped into these silos when the real answers are how do you bring them together? So you really need to think about a holistic aftermarket platform. How do you bring together all the different data sets you need so that you get clarity? And I know we've got some very large global companies who, despite all the data coming into our systems from their own data stores, they still subscribe to our Data Central because they need clean, transformed, mapped data that they actually can access and use. And sometimes they struggle inside their own orgs. Even data gatekeepers get in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned one thing there that I thought was interesting, Sean, where it was access and data that could be used, right? So I think there's one part where we say the foundation is to make the data accessible across the business so that we can have access to it. But I also think be able to seed a recommendation, be able to tell a user who may not be data savvy. We're talking to CIOs today, but the frontline worker isn't a data geek like I am. They need to be provided with the intelligence to make decisions at the point of service and need. And I think that's where the IT organization could really make this easier for the front line to become data geniuses, as opposed to just trying to turn a wrench without having the right insights to be able to revolutionize their operations.
And this is also where we're seeing some really exciting elements with generative AI. We just rolled out a feature for our Data Central that allows natural language text to SQL, where you don't need to know SQL in order to get answers out of the database. You can just compose a business question. Show me the dealers over the last 8 weeks who have the lowest service availability, and you'll get an output of that data. So it's starting to put real information in the hands of people who can make better decisions.
Yep. Okay. And as we know, to make AI effective or any of this process, really, you need, quality data. So, Ali, back to you. What are the important data points to consider and to make sure you collect to make this all work?
Yeah, so there's a number of them, right? What I think was interesting about Sean's AI and generative AI use case that was laid out is if we think about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, it was all about summarization. What Sean's talking about is insights, recommendations, the ability to act, right? And I think that's where I see the opportunity moving forward when you think about having clean data to be able to make decisions. When I think about ways in which organizations are evolving, you went from capturing to intelligence to contextualization. And where I think the opportunity for the aftermarket is moving forward is to take these data sets from functional siloed areas and really orchestrate this data so that you're able to have shared decisions that impact the business. A little bit outside this use case, but I'm going to throw a curveball to the team, right? So aftermarket data sits within our silo that we use to get better at processing claim or scheduling a service worker or knowing what part needs to be on site when we get there. But how about how this data can really help us drive a new revenue discussion? So I should know, what parts are needed, which consumables I should be planning for when I go on site as a customer. I should be able to trigger discounts based off of defects, right? I should be able to understand how an autonomous recall can occur based off of understanding where the defects are within the business. So I think that's where the data story is evolving, is to take data from different functions and silos and start to trigger autonomous activities and actions based off of those data feeds.
That is really the future that's arriving already. William Gibson had a great quote, "The future's already here, it's just not distributed evenly." And I think building on what Ali has said, it also even comes down to a role that the CIO can be the hero for their organization. Because I see so many customers where they are setting the best objectives they can within each of their functional silos. But the goals aren't improve loyalty because they don't know even how to get there or measure this aftermarket share because of their data silos. And this is a chance for the CIO to actually not just solve a systems problem or a data landscape problem, but actually enable a higher level function for the company of how do we know if what we're doing is driving better retention, loyalty, and aftermarket share. CIO can make this happen by unlocking the data to even set the annual targets for each of these divisions.
Right.
Yeah, to piggyback off that before we move on, a number of the organizations I deal with grow up through acquisition, right? So you have not only different systems, you have different businesses that are trying to, become one, right? We're starting to coin the term around orchestration. So how can we take data across businesses, across regions, and provide a standard without having an intelligence engine that can make sense of all of those data points across those silos? You're never going to get to a point where you understand what does loyalty even mean across the business. Is it different in region X over region Y? And how can you understand the data from a foundational level perspective to make everyone on the same standard, to know what good is?
Right. Yeah, that's where I was hoping to dive into a deeper AI discussion. I mean, if you got this mountain of data, assuming you can get your arms around that. Sean, you already mentioned some of the ways you guys are using AI. Could you talk about that a little more?
Oh, sure. I mean, AI and ML, they're designed for this type of challenge and activity. I was reflecting the other day, going back, my very first product management job was on machine learning at Amazon 25 years ago. And it really taught a valuable lesson of machines are fantastic at combing through vast quantities of data and finding pattern, correlation, and causality that you didn't even know were there, but are. And so this is really where you want to be able to leverage that. But the best value actually comes from combining a smart strategist or analyst in your business with the power of AI and ML to help make sense of it, because you want both the strategy and the tactics.
Mm-hmm. Allie, does that make sense with what you're seeing?
It does. I mean, we've moved, we've been in this business for a while. And it's laughable sometimes as an analyst when you think that AI is new, right? I mean, I think Sean is already talking about his long history with data, right? It's always been there. We've had advanced analytics. We've had AI. We've had machine learning. What we're doing now is actually providing frontline insights that didn't used to happen at the edge, right? We didn't used to have a field worker, a parts planner, a warranty adjudicator have these types of on-demand insights and intelligence, which I think is changing the way we all consume data and use data, right? I think that's where the shift is occurring. It's not a data scientist off in back office. It's someone like you and I, who may not have advanced degrees and PhDs, but we're provided with the recommendations that make sense for our job and our task and our ability to impact the customer relationship. I think that's the way in which AI has evolved.
Okay. Yeah, and as you also mentioned, all this data can help companies measure their success with their aftermarket service efforts. Are there particular KPIs they should be looking at, for example? Does IDC have any recommendations on that?
Yeah, so where I think there's an opportunity is KPIs have often been very functional. My manager cares about my task that I do. And we haven't really talked about KPIs that go across the organization, go across the aftermarket set of functions. What I'm intrigued by is how someone in the contact center could be looking at first time fix, or someone, the field level can understand inventory turns and that they're leveraging the right spares. I always go back to one example where, you want to impact first time fix. So the technician is going to swap out every part on site on the machine just to make sure they can, close that work order. But you then have all this no fault found, work that needs to be repaired and put back out in the marketplace. I think there's an opportunity as organizations rethink the end goal, which if the end goal is customer loyalty, the end goal is retention or customer satisfaction or employee engagement, that the metrics align with that outcome across the business. So you're not using siloed or functional KPI like utilization, productivity, or first time fix if that's not the goal you want to achieve, the behavior you want to impact. So what we try to recommend is that organizations think from the customer back into the business. So what is the goal? Is it delivering more value to customers? How can we measure that across businesses? Maybe it is first time fix. Maybe it's maybe it's something else that's going to help drive at a new value proposition to customers. And that's how we rethink it. It's hard to say it's a one size fits all because you have companies of different industries, companies of different size, different maturity from a technology perspective. But You have to look at the outcome that you're trying to deliver and make sure the behaviors across functions align with delivering that outcome.
That makes
Absolutely.
sense.
Totally agree with that focus on that overall customer loyalty. And there's some examples of some of our clients we see where a dealer delivering full service gets amazing customer feedback and net promoter score. But in another industry, that might be viewed as overbilling or too much work versus the customer came in for an oil change, they left with a new transmission, they've got sticker shock. How does that affect their loyalty to the brand? And this is where the answer is inside your data. You really need to be able to get this holistic view of what's happening at these service events. And at a customer ID level, are you gaining or losing both the big service events like a transmission versus a small service event like an oil change? Because that's your canary in the coal mine early indicator on customer loyalty.
All right. Well, in the last couple of minutes here, any final thoughts you'd like to leave folks with? Maybe next steps to take for those looking to up their game in terms of taking advantage of this aftermarket opportunity? Ali, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, what I would recommend for organizations is that they prioritize lifetime value. So we've talked about this a few different times. A customer is not just in place for today, not a transaction, right? A customer should be with your organization across your business. And when I want to believe that the aftermarket can be the leading edge of driving that change. We talk about someone buying a machine, a widget once, but they transact with a service organization quite often. Right, multiple times a year. It could be, more than, a dozen times. Right. You hope it's not always for a failure, but they're interacting, and engaging. So delivering that lifetime value is where I see organizations really needing to evolve and help move beyond being a commodity or a transaction, but a differentiator. We also see that, we've talked a lot about AI and insights and knowledge. I think organizations, CIOs, need to enable the service business with the right level of contextual intelligence to drive at the right set of decisions at the point of need. And then finally, we've talked about disconnected, fragmented, reactive environments. We continue to see organizations think about a platform approach to excellence. How can data go across applications? How can it be orchestrated and integrated in order to ensure that we're able to make decisions for the value of a customer as opposed to just having more technology just for technology's sake?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Sean, any closing thoughts from you?
Absolutely. As I think about for a lot of our customers across the industry, in the past, they got good results with point solution improvements across the various functional silos of their business. But ultimately, that's reaching a local optimum, and the competition keeps raising the bar and keeps stealing your customers away for service opportunities and retention, and maybe even their next purchase of a vehicle. So you've got to raise the game, and you need to stop doing the siloed application view. How do you get a holistic view of how the whole fits together? The data compatibility and the data extensibility goes a long way to being able to join the dots so that you can make a better decision to run your aftermarket business. That's what's going to make the difference for real loyalty.
All right. Very good. Well, lots to think about there. That was a great conversation, guys. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. But so I've been chatting with Ali Pinder of IDC and Sean O'Neill of Synchron. I want to thank you both again for your time and insights today. It's really appreciated. Thanks also to our sponsor, Synchron. And one more reminder, there's lots more information and assets about this topic in the resources section of your player, so be sure to check that out before you go. For Synchron, IDC, and CIO Marketing Services, I'm Paul Desmond. Thanks for tuning in.